Before we get started, a couple of expectations in this video. This is not a video that conforms to the objects first philosophy, which means that I am already expecting you to have mastered the basic components of Java, meaning that you should be familiar with what an if statement is, you should know how a loop works, you should know how to create and use different methods, you should probably have used arrays and strings as well. And so I'm assuming that you've covered all of those basics, and now we are going to focus on introducing objects, which are pretty much what the main core of Java. So what is object-oriented programming? The way I like to think about object-oriented programming is by thinking about the world around us. And the world around us can pretty much, our experiences in the world around us can be summarized by a series of interactions from object to object. So when I pick up a phone and then call my mother, right, I'm interacting with the phone. I am doing something that I can do. I can lift. I am dialing on the phone. So I am interacting with the phone, and then the phone has a capability of connecting to another phone, and then my mom is doing the same thing on the other end, and then now I can talk to her. So that is a series of interactions between three objects: me, the phone, or four objects: me, my phone, my mother's phone, and her. And all of us are performing some sort of function that we can do. So what is an object in computer science? An object is basically something that has a combination of states and behaviors. States are like properties, so for a telephone, that could be the numbers it has on the keypad, or the way it looks, or anything like that. And its behaviors are things it can do. So like it can connect to other phones and allow you to transmit calls. Why is this important and why is this useful? Well, let's say you now have this basic understanding of how Java programming works without objects, right? And some guy who runs a, let's say some car dealer wants you to build a program for him. And he wants you to keep track of car sales, and he wants to be able to enter information about a car, and it would keep track of, which cars were bought and which cars were sold, and things like that, right? And he wants to keep track of several things about the car. He wants you to keep track of the name of the car that was sold, the model number, the price, the color, let's say, the year, all these different types of things, right? So currently the way that you would probably approach this problem is by having a series of parallel arrays. So let's say he has 100 different cars. You would have an array of 100 strings that would represent the model number, an array of 100 integers that would represent the price, and then you would figure out, and like the 50th index would represent the 50th car. So the 50th index in the model list would be the model of the 50th car, and the 50th index in the integer array would be the price of the 50th car. You suppose that would be the 49th index if it's zero-based. So that isn't very organized. It can easily be changed. People don't really, when they're reading your code, they don't understand what's going on. It's hard for you to keep track. It would make much more sense rather than having two different arrays, because you're really just keeping track of cars, if you could do something like having one array of cars, rather than an array of strings, and an array of integers, and an array of, say, Boolean variables based on whether or not this car is used, and etc., etc., etc. Just have all those properties grouped together under car, and then have an array of cars. So basically, I'm going to show you how to be able to do that. So let's create a new class. We'll call it car.java. Okay, we'll say public class car. Sorry. All right. And now we're going to list some basic attributes of cars. So let's say public string model number. you might wonder why you might wonder two things. First of all, why do I not have a public static void main string args? Why am I creating a variable outside of any method? And why do I have public in front of it? For now, just think of it like any other variable. Don't worry really why I have public in front of it. That's something that I'll get to later, what exactly public means. But bear with me for just a sec. So, public string model number. Let's say public boolean used, whether it's used or new. Let's say public, think a double, price. Right? Okay, let's just do those are the only three things we care about. Probably they're not the only things we care about, but let's just say. So then once we've done that, if I save this, then I can create a new file. We will call it myprogram.java. Okay? And in here, this is going to look more similar to the programs that we know. So I can say public class myprogram. Or we'll call it car program to be more specific. Car program. Obviously, we need to change the file name, so rename car program. Okay. And now we'll say public static void main string args. Okay. And now I'm going to, this isn't going to be the fully functioning car program that they wanted. This is just to give an example of storing cars in an array. So let's create a new car. The way we create a new integer or create a new variable, we say something like int x equals 5, right? If you've used scanner before, then you've seen something like scanner input equals new scanner system.in. This sort of format can be abstracted to the following, which is data type variable name equals value, right? This is generally the very abstract format of what you're dealing with in a variable declaration. So we're creating a new car. We will call it car. It will have the value of being a new car. You will always use the keyword new to create a new object. So a scanner is an object, and that's why you use new here. This is not an object. 5 is not an object. 5 is just a number. It's called a primitive data type. Anything that isn't an object is a primitive data type in terms of data. So pretty much, if you haven't been using new, then you're not going to be using new. But any sort of value that you haven't come across yet, probably in Java, is probably an object, and we'll take new. Probably. Okay. So we've just created this new car, and now I can do something like car dot model number equals 43G V3S. Let's just say. I have no idea if that's a valid model number, but let's pretend it is. And then we'll say car.used equals false, and car.price equals 1,000. Right? Then we can do something like this. System.out.println car.price, we could say. The price of the car is this. Save that, and let's try to compile that. Java C, well, hold on, what did we call it? Car program. All right, Java C, car program.java. That worked. Java car program. Excellent. So the price of our car is $1,000, and that's correct, right? So, what exactly just happened here? So, this public class car is basically a new object. It is a new thing. Obviously, you can't physically see the car, but you can imagine it like a car. And basically, it is a collection of these pieces of data all grouped together under this abstract categorization of car. A good analogy for this is if I tell you to go look out your window, you know exactly what I'm referring to. But what is a window? A window is actually just a series of glass glass panels and maybe some drapes or something like that. What is a drape? A drape is basically just like cotton hanging down from a bar of metal or something along those lines, right? And all of these things, like all of these little different components, you just group together under the name window. So that's basically how you should think about properties and objects. You have a model number, a question of whether or not it's used, and a price. These three variables, these three properties, are all grouped together under this abstraction that we're going to call a car, right? And then we can use this abstraction in our car program, where we create a new car, which is a new, just like you would build a new window or a new anything else. Creating a new object, and an object is this abstraction of data, and then we can set specific data and use it however we want in our program. So a couple of things. The first is, why does this work? Probably up until now you've been taught that you need public static void main string args in order for your program to run. So what is this thing here? So a class is not actually just a program. A class, this is a redefinition, a more proper definition of what a class is. A class is not a program. A class is a blueprint for an object. So that might make you think, okay, well, that makes sense for car, but what about car program? Is car program an object? Well, yes, it actually is. Car program right now is an object that doesn't have any sort of property, and it doesn't really have any sort of things it can do, really, except for this main. But if we wanted to create a car program, we could. We could actually say car program cp equals new car program. And this should also compile. So if I do java c car program.java, that compiles totally fine, because this is valid. It actually is an object. You would never really do this, and whatever your main, your driver program is, like car program or something that isn't actually an object and just the main method, you really wouldn't ever do that. But you could. It's valid. Because a class is a blueprint of an object. Okay. So, I want to go into more depth about what exactly is going on in this line. This here is what is called a pointer. A pointer is you can think of it as an arrow, I suppose, to a certain spot in memory. So let's say we're going to pretend that this is your computer's memory, and I'm going to put this all in the comments so that I can draw some ASCII art over here. But let's say your computer's memory looks something like this. I don't know. I meant to copy the new line there. There we go. Okay, so your computer's memory is basically this long array. That's pretty much what memory looks like, right? And what is going on here? In here, when you say car equals new car, here's the information. You can just think of it this way. It's actually a little bit more complicated than this, but for your purposes as a new programmer, you can think of it like this. The new car object is here inside memory, and of course the way that's handled in memory is beyond the scope of what I'm actually trying to explain here, but that is the new car object that is sitting in memory. And when you say car equals new car, and I could call this anything. I could call this foobar if I want to, right? Let's just say I call it foobar. Obviously, in order to be consistent with names, this would have to be foobar, and foobar. But I can name it whatever I want, just like I can name any other variable whatever I want. What is happening here? Well, we have an arrow pointing to this spot in memory, and this arrow is named foobar. And this foobar arrow is an arrow that is allowed to point to any slot in memory that holds a car. That's what this piece means. That's what this piece of this line means. It means I am creating a new arrow, a new pointer, foobar, and it is allowed to point to any car. And which car is it pointing to? Well, it's pointing to this new car right over here. But if I were to create a new car after that, say I did foo, after like, let's say I set these values, and then I said something like foobar equals new car. Well, what would happen? This new car would have its values all set for it, but then, all of a sudden, bam, foobar is gone from over there because there's a new car to which foobar is now pointing. I know this is a little bit messy here with ASCII art, but whatever, just accept it. So now foobar is pointing over here. And now I can change the attributes of this car. What happens to this one? Well, it was pointed to by foobar, and we set some values for it, but now foobar is no longer pointing to it. So what happened to the car? Can we find out what its values are? Can we use it at all? Turns out we cannot, because there is no way of possibly referencing it. And so what happens is a special feature in Java comes to take care of it, called the garbage collection. And garbage collection is extremely important in society because it keeps, the streets sanitary, and it keeps our houses from being smelly. Same thing with code; it keeps our code nice and clean. That's what the job of garbage collection. So it's like, oh, this must be trash because you're no longer pointing you to it, you no longer want it, and they sweep it away, and that's it. And so then you can no longer access that car. So if you want to maintain, if you want to use an object, you need to make sure that you at least have some pointer that is maintaining a reference to it, that is pointing to it. So this would be a bad move over here. You could do something like, if you wanted both of them, you could do car and then foobar 2, or something like that. Right? Okay. One last thing, and then I guess that's it for this intro to objects. What is this dot syntax? What is going on here? Well, you might have guessed, okay, well, this is the model number for foobar. You might not have known what the dot is, but that's probably what you're guessing, and that would be correct. This is called the dot operator, and the dot operator basically has the following syntax. It is the object name dot property and possibly parameters. And this is the same for methods and for values. And in general, it's going to take on this form rather than object name dot property equals something. The reason it'll take on this form has to do with something called encapsulation, which we are not talking about in this episode, but we'll cover maybe in the next one or the one after. But in general, it takes this form, and it basically says the object name, which is foobar, right? Foobar is a type of car, dot property. Well, what are the car properties? We can see that here. These are the 3 properties of car. So we name the property, and then we can just refer to it however we want. And the properties, those property values will be different for every single new car that we create. So what if we do something like this? What if we say, let's call this foobar, and then we say car Sizzy is equal to foobar, right? Then we do Sizzy dot price equals 500, and now we want to know foobar dot price. Well, what happens here? Is a new car created for Sizzy? No. Sizzy is just a pointer, and it is now pointing to the same thing that foobar is pointing to. So now we have both foobar and Sizzy pointing to the same thing. And then if we did something like foobar equals new car, right? Then we now have foobar pointing to a new car, and it is no longer pointing to this one, but Sizzy is still pointing to it. And that's how memory would work. And once you have Sizzy set to somewhere else, then garbage collection would come and sweep that car up. Yeah, so I hope all this was clear. This is basically objects in a very, very basic nutshell. It's just a collection of data. How that data is used, and all the really cool things that we can do with objects is pretty much what the rest of Intro Java is all about. But this is the core concept of objects. Objects are an abstraction of data in order to let you think about them in a clearer way, so that rather than having like multiple arrays or trying to manage price in one integer variable and used in a different Boolean variable, you put them all together under one group that is car, and that just makes it much simpler to understand what is going on. And that's it. So I hope that was clear, and stay tuned for the next lesson. Bye.